Come along with us as we explore the broad world of preservation and the work being done to preserve, interpret, and save our past in a 21st century world. From aquaculture to historic foodways to forensic modeling, we're talking weekly with experts from across the globe. This is your host, Nick Redding. Welcome to PreserveCast. Did you know that the Campaign for Historic Trades, which is powered by Preservation Maryland, is the sponsor of 3 registered apprenticeship programs? The campaign also hosts workshops across the nation, maybe even one in your backyard. Visit historictrades.org to learn more and find a way to learn a trade. This is Nick Redding, and you are once again listening to PreserveCast. Today we have a really interesting guest who we're going to be talking about from several different angles and understanding their story and how they got so involved in education and teaching in genealogy. And our guest is Athina Ramphal, who is, in addition to being a psychology student at Johns Hopkins University, is also the founder and CEO of the Genealogy Club. And then also serves as Miss Diwali 2026. And we're going to talk about what all that means and how all these threads kind of come together and are an interesting part of heritage preservation and in talking to kids about culture and history and all that cool stuff. Before we do that, just a quick reminder that if you're listening and you're enjoying what you're listening to on PreserveCast, we hope that you will like this and subscribe to this and share this. Those things all help tremendously. And then make sure you are subscribed to PreserveCast because those numbers help us quite a bit as we grow our listenership. But as I mentioned today, we're going to be talking to Athina a little bit about her background. So speaking of background and kind of setting the stage for all this, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up and what kind of put you on the path to this fascination with history, but genealogy and family history? Where did that all begin?
So I guess it started with the same question you just asked me, which is like, who am I? Tell me about yourself. Where do you come from? And I remember being in lower school and middle school and people would ask me that all the time. And I would sit there and I'd be like, I don't know how to answer that question. Sometimes I would say Indian, sometimes I would say Guyanese, but then they'd be like Ghanaian and Latina. And I'm like, no, still no. And at some point I just gave up and I felt very invisible. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I didn't deserve to have a label. It wasn't until I joined the Finding Your Roots to Seedlings program in 2017, which was a spinoff of the show Finding Your Roots on PBS with Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., that I really started to figure out that I had an identity that was important and something that is worth being proud of. And it wasn't until then I started to figure out that there's this question of who am I, and I should look into answering that. And so actually you would think that that program made me fall in love with genealogy and that's what really got it started. I actually hated genealogy after that program. And as much as I love Dr. Gates and they've been such wonderful mentors to me, I actually didn't love genealogy because everyone around me was finding records from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. I mean, one guy found out he was related to royalty. So I felt left out. I was like, I can't find anything because none of my records are digitized. I can't fly to Britain to go find my records, unfortunately. So I felt really left out. And I found one record from 2011 that I already knew about. So I said, all right, I'm giving up on this genealogy thing. I'm moving on with my life. So for a couple of years, that's how it was. And then fast forward to 2019, and I said, let me look into this a little bit more. And that's when Genealogy Club started as a high school club. And then we discovered a 70-year-old secret in my family. And it had to do with my grandma's biological father. And that's what kickstarted my love for genealogy, or like reignited that flame, let's put it that way. It really showed me that genealogy is very versatile. You can do oral genealogy, it could be DNA, it could be the paper trail. You can really go any route that you want to. And so after, sticking with that for a couple of years, my genealogy club became a nonprofit called the Genealogy Club. And I finally now can say that I can confidently say I know how to answer that question of who am I? I know I'm a proud Guyanese American, Miss Diwali 2026. And I mean, I have a goal to make sure that no kid ever feels like they don't have, a say in this world, or they can comfortably, sit with their identity and be able to be confident in who they are in themselves.
I mean, that's like an awesome answer and kind of a great sort of intro to this conversation. And it's interesting that, I met you in a completely different context. And then you started talking about genealogy and history and all these connections. And I was so fascinated by it. And fascinated because you had so much energy and enthusiasm and passion for it. And that came across. But also, like, I think that a lot of people think of genealogy as something for one group of people, or it's sort of like, that's something that you can do if your ancestors have been, like you said, in this country for hundreds of years. And, for more recent immigrants to the United States, or people who have a different path to citizenship here, it's a different story, and it requires different skill sets. And for a long time, you kind of pointed out, people have kind of been like locked out of that. Like you even said in your own experience, you felt like, well, this isn't for me. Talk to us about the challenges, like when you finally got to that sort of aha moment, you had that breakthrough. How did you do that? I know the genealogy is so different for different groups, right? Like there's a whole study of like African American genealogy, because so much of that genealogy is very challenging because census records are incomplete, or they don't list names, or all of those different things that happened in the past that wiped people sort of out of the record books. And I'm curious what it took, because you said, you couldn't fly to Britain, you couldn't go here, you couldn't go there. How did you actually do it?
Yeah. So I think it was it was a roller coaster. That's the first thing that comes to mind, especially because there was the emotional aspect of it, and then also the curiosity. Like it's like you're going into the unknown. You don't know what you're going to find. You have no idea if you're going to be left with more questions than you have answers. And that's the number one thing when anyone tells me, oh, I want to start my genealogy, or this is my problem, I want to figure out, whatever. I tell them, like, well, first things first, you need to know what you're getting into, because you can be left heartbroken. You can be left with more questions than answers, like I said. So you really need to know the risks before you go into it. And that's something I didn't know going into it. And when we had heard rumors, so a little background on the 70-year-old secret that we uncovered. We had heard rumors in my family that my grandma's biological mother wasn't her biological mother. And we were like, that's a little odd. Then we heard her biological father wasn't her biological father. And then we're like, hold on, this is too much confusion. We need to figure out actually what the answer is. And so my mom and I took it upon ourselves. It's my mom's mom. We took it upon ourselves to, like, let's just investigate this a little bit more. And I get most of my little investigative genes from my mom and my mom's dad, because he was actually an investigator back in Guyana. And we did a little bit of research, and we couldn't find anything, obviously, through paper trails. So what my mom did was she went old school, and she called around to her relatives, and we sat and we talked to them. And believe it or not, many of them were like, no, like, what are you talking about? Like, no, that never happened. Like, you're going crazy. Like, that's the culture in Guyana. It's very taboo to be, poking around at your family, to be poking around at different things. And that was one of the first lessons I learned of genealogy. Like, not a lot of people are willing to look into the past. But anyway, so we called around, and we found out that finally somebody was willing to talk. And they said, they had heard that there was something in the village that my grandma's biological father wasn't her biological father. So now that we had this confirmed, we went back into her DNA. We had her do a DNA kit, like, prior to that. And we looked at the relatives, and there was somebody in the relatives that did not belong there. We were like, that person should not be there. And then we decided, okay, let's call my grandma, because she might know, but we're not going to tell her that we're doing anything, just like slyly try to get information out of her. So we called her, and she was like, I've heard some stuff, but I just kind of ignored it. And that was pretty much the call. So my mom was actually logged into my grandma's Facebook at the same time that she made that call. And a little bit, like a couple minutes after we hang up the phone, we get a notification on my mom's computer that says, it's from a Facebook Messenger, and it's my grandma messaging the daughter of the guy that we think is her biological father. now in real time, my mom, her sister, my aunt, and me and my grandma, well, she doesn't know that we're watching, are sitting and watching this conversation happen in real time. And they're saying, my grandma asks the question, are we related? Then she responds, I can't believe I'm saying this after so many years. We're stepsisters. And the time stopped completely, like the world stopped spinning. My mom was speechless. My aunt was crying. I was speechless. My grandma, I don't know how she was feeling. And then we got a call from my grandfather saying my grandma's crying and he doesn't know why. And then we're like, oh no. So the long story short, she ended up coming. We brought her over to our house and we kind of talked everything through. And then we finally figured out that her biological father wasn't her biological father. And that was the first. And then I had a conversation with my grandma about genealogy and what this means to her and what it means to me. And she told me that it was a shock at first, and she wishes that we told her first before we did anything. But she's thankful that she knows now. And she's thankful now that we have extended family that we didn't even know about. And now she sort of has filled in a lot of questions that she didn't know she had. And she said that she wants me to continue to do this because she sees what an impact it can have on people. And I think that was the moment. And then I just remember seeing my grandma and my dad talk about things. They were never really close, and they were close but not that close, but the situation really sort of bonded them together because he had some experience with it too. So I saw how it brewed connection and family and unity. And afterwards we did what us Indo-Caribbeans do, which is just hang out and cook food and listen to music. And that moment was kind of the moment where I said, this is who I am. This is Guyanese culture. This is me. I shouldn't be afraid of telling anyone I'm Guyanese American. That's who I am. And it's who I will always say I am. America is a melting pot of so many cultures. And that's one thing that genealogy shows us is that, and it can be used as a tool to really teach that to kids. And I think that's when I realized genealogy is such a powerful, powerful tool. It just needs to be used in the right way and intentionally in order to be effective and beautiful.
Yeah, what a powerful story, and also kind of, it's to put words to kind of what I was trying to suggest before, that genealogy is for everyone. And I think that, obviously there's been different narratives about that before. And I think some of it's also because it can be very challenging. Like you said, you're dealing more with DNA than certain records, or if there are records, then they were written differently, or, so I'm curious when it comes to the actual work of this, when you're working with students, are you working with students from a diversity of backgrounds, a diversity of experiences and prior nationalities in terms of what the records are like? That's really what I'm trying to get at, which is how challenging is it to work with so many different record types? Because just keeping the American census straight is difficult, let alone trying to dig into other countries and varying levels of digitization. So as you get further back, is DNA really sort of revolutionized things, or can you also is there a record trail as well?
Mm-hmm. So I guess speaking to your first question about kids, I think especially with the Finding Roots of Seedlings curriculum, what we did in the program in 2017 was we really did go and try to look into our genealogy. And I think knowing how I felt about it at the time, now when I teach genealogy, I try to emphasize the effect it can have on you, and I give you the tools in order to do it. And it's up to you whether you take that and you're in the driver's seat. If you want to go down that route or if you want to go down a different route, that's totally up to you. And I make sure that's known. And I really give them the first thing I give them is it's like an interview sheet. So they can go home, ask their mom, their dad, their grandparents, what's your name? Who were you married to? What's your correct name? Because I remember growing up, I thought my mom's name was Mom and my grandma's name was Nanny, because that's what I knew growing up. But,
and it is surprising how much of your recent genealogy, I think sometimes we think genealogy and we're well, we've got to get back 250 years or whatever that special time period is we want to hit. But it is always amazing how many people can't name their great grandfather.
Right. Yeah.
right?
And
Which
for
is
so
pretty
long,
wild. I mean, that reminds us that it goes pretty quick. So even that recent genealogy is important. So that's really interesting, that piece about like just getting you to ask those questions.
Yeah, no, and even to when, like, I remember how obsessed I was at looking at old photos that my mom brought back from Guyana and my grandparents brought here when they came, and it was just eye-opening that, like, we have, like, footing in this world, like, we belong. I mean, even connecting it to sort of like the recent launch of Artemis 2 and their trip. I mean, they're seeing this world as like from such far away, and they've talked about how they see it as just one. Like they see that it's just a place that humans are so special, and to have them be in a world where we have community, we have love, we have kindness, we have innovation. It's amazing to be a part of this world, and genealogy just gives you that foundation that, you belong here and you've always been here and you have a path. And I think going back to your question about like kids specifically, I try to give them the foundation so they know that, at least know who your grandparents are, at least know your mom, your dad. And I know I've encountered some situations where it's like, I don't have a parent I can go ask a question to. And in that case, that's where we go with like, let's look into the history of where you live. Let's look in the history of this music or this song that you really like, or this dish that somebody cooks for you or that you cook. Like, let's see what spices make up this dish. And then, a kid will start saying, oh, I have, my mom uses this spice in this dish. And then another kid will be like, oh, me too. And then it's, it's like it's a beautiful little, you see these little like sparks flying everywhere. And man, I would not trade any moment like that for the world. It's such a beautiful sight.
Yeah, it seems to me like what you're describing too is that, genealogy has been used for different purposes, not always great ones, and sometimes really affirming ones. But you're describing something that's more. Correct me if I'm wrong, but hearing you say this, it's more about like finding yourself, not just finding out your ancestry, not just being able to connect one dot to the next, but like, this is who I am. This is sort of what makes me up. This is all the different pieces, and we are all different pieces too. We're not just one thing.
I always say we're part of this larger tapestry of this world full of diversity and beautiful culture. And we're all just individual threads, but we make up a beautiful picture. And I think that really comes across in what I try to teach and what the seedlings taught me, which is that what we're really doing here is figuring out who you are, yes, answering that question of who am I, but also how do you fit into this world? Where do you, how do you belong? We know you belong, but how do you belong, So, and I think that's really the core of what we try to do in the Genealogy Club and with my new initiative, Project I.D.E.A.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that, because not everybody who's a part of a genealogy club goes on to found a nonprofit. That's not everybody who's part of any club goes on to actually found a more sustainable nonprofit, but you did that. Where did that all start? I guess I'm not sure you mentioned, but like where you grew up, sort of geographically, but like where did that start? Where is it today? And why did it have to become its own nonprofit? And what does that nonprofit now do?
So I pretty much grew up around the East Coast. My family moved around a lot due to work. So, it really was, I did get to experience a lot of different cultures at once. And so it really started when I founded my high school club, and I realized like this has potential to like make kids smile, make young kids smile. And I knew that like I was really happy when I was at the camp in 2017. I want to do this for more kids around the world. And so I went to my mom and my dad and I was like, can I form a nonprofit? And they were like, yes. But they were really confused because they were like, where did this come from? Like, why do you want to do it? And I was like, I don't know. Like, let's see where it can go. And that's kind of been my motto since then. It's been take risks. Like, you don't know where you can end up. And now I'm Miss Diwali and I'm going to be competing for Miss Maryland in June. So there's so many, you don't know where your path takes you. But so I founded it it became a nonprofit in like 2020, 2021. This was around COVID. And the first project that I took on was to do a international pilot program that was grant funded for 30 kids in the Caribbean, from Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad. And we shipped out materials, and it was virtual, obviously, again, because of COVID. But I remember, like, kind of tying it back to your last question, parents were emailing me, and they were asking me, like, are kids going to find out, like, secrets? Are they going to find out anything? And I was like, one, wait, is there anything to find out? And two, no. It's, I try to show kids what I learned when I, found out what I found out with my grandma, which is, there's oral genealogy, there's genetic genealogy, there's DNA, there's paper trails. There's so many, like you can have it with criminology, you can have it with, with history. There's so many different ways genealogy can be utilized and so many different ways it can play into things. And that's what I really tried to get across in that week. And they loved it. They were so interested. And when I went back the year later, I went back to Guyana and I showed them, I did it in person with a high school, and they absolutely loved it. And it was like, a lot of laughs, a lot of giggles, and it was just so fun to see. And especially like being so young too, I think it's helpful to connect with kids closer to my age. So they see that like genealogy, and like I think you had asked this prior too, like, you don't really think of me when you think of genealogy. You don't think of a person that looks like me. And I think it's helpful to show that like anyone can do genealogy. And that's something that Dr. Gates himself learned when doing Finding Your Roots. Like anyone can do their genealogy. It is for anyone, like you said. And it's like, it's a powerful tool, and it can show you so much.
Yeah, and I mean, representation matters, right? It's like when you're reading a book, when you're involved in a sport, or you are looking up to Artemis, representation matters. And I think that, you're obviously doing some really important work when it comes to genealogy and the passion that you bring to it too. I suppose you're probably still on a genealogy journey of your own. It never really ends, right? Like you're always kind of looking. But what kind of programming are you offering? How do you do the work? And like, if people wanted to get engaged with it, how could they learn more about it? Or like, they're like, oh, my kids would love this, or I would love to bring this to my school district. How do they get engaged?
First, you could always get in contact with me, and I would love to come and help out. That's one, but also the Finding Your Resilience curriculum can be done at home. So they have a lot of at-home materials that they provide, whether that's making a DNA strand out of really yummy Twizzlers and gummy bears. I'm not gonna lie, I've eaten way too many of them, and I think I've gotten enough of my share. But it's a really, really fun activity, and like that just teaches you the basics of DNA, and it's so simple, so fun, and kids are always engaged. That's one option. There's a See Your Own DNA experiment, which shows you the other side of like genetic genealogy. And then obviously, like I said, the interview, there's like a scavenger hunt that you can do with heirlooms. So there's a lot of different things that you can do at home. And I mean, that's why I love the Finding Your Roots curriculum. It's so, you can do so many different things with it. And that's why I love using it when I go into schools. So you can go into schools. I teach primarily connect with youth, but I can also speak to educators. And there's also videos online with PBS Learning Media. I've done two of them. One is on how to start your own club and nonprofit. And the other one is, how to start your own genealogy. So any of those resources are really, really helpful. And especially the Finding Your Resilience curriculum. I mean, I'm so honored to be an ambassador for the curriculum, because it's it's the curriculum that started it all for me,
Yeah, no, this is very cool. And I love that our first true genealogy episode is with you. Like this is, so yeah, I mean, we've covered preservation from many different angles, but sort of the preservation of people's stories is such an important piece of this. And I think that, as you said too, you're a younger person, and so you're bringing a different passion, a different perspective to it that kids can engage with as well, which is great. Because that's the other piece too, is that I think a lot of times people think of genealogy and they think it's something that an older person is probably doing who has time for it or something like that, and turning it into something that kids can do is also sort of a flip on sort of the traditional script when it comes to genealogy, which I think is really interesting. Do you ever have kids come into it who are like, I'm bored by this, or like, I don't want to do this, and then have some surprise moment? Like, have you seen kids turn around in the process?
I've seen, yes. I've seen so many, like, especially, I think hands-on experiments has been my way to show kids that this can be really, really interesting. And, when I do, the number one thing I see when the number one experiment that I do where I see that happen is the See Your Own DNA experiment, where it's a lot of giggles and it's a lot of fun, where you're like gargling with salt water and then you're spitting it in a test tube and a whole bunch of stuff. But, at the end of the day, what I try to teach kids is like, the first step is to label your test tube. And the reason is because, and then I bring it back at the end and I say, if we didn't label our test tubes, you wouldn't be able to tell each other apart. And it's because we're all the same at the end of the day. And I think it's that revelation sometimes that really sits with kids in a way, and they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, we all look the same. There's all that little cloudy stuff, and that's all our DNA, and it's all different when you look closer and deeper. But at the face of it, we're all the same. We're all, we're all a community, and that's kind of what I try to show kids. And I've seen like that eureka moment happens when they're like, actually, if you would like to look at the Finding Your Seedlings web series, it's online, and I think in the DNA episode, there's a clip of me looking at my own DNA, and I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. And there's like, my eyes are like crossed and everything. Not one of my finest moments, but definitely one for the books. But it's that eureka moment where kids have like when even the Finding Your Seedlings program, when someone found out they were related to royalty, or they went back great grandparent, they were like, whoa, like this is cool. And even finding a record of like, I've seen people find a record of their like parents' marriage, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, and they like go and show their parents like, look, you guys are married. Like, it's just like a little like, it confirms what you've always known. Sometimes it gives you more questions than answers, yes, but most of the time it's like, oh my gosh, like I actually discovered something about myself. Like, I'm no longer defending my own identity, I'm discovering it. And I think that's what really, really hits people, and hits kids especially.
Yeah, and what a powerful thing just to right now at this moment and everything like that. I think just kind of understanding where we all belong. And I love that piece too about how you wouldn't be able to tell anybody apart because their DNA basically all looks the same unless you're able to read it. So obviously we've talked extensively about the genealogy piece. You're also Miss Diwali 2026. Which we've never had. We've never talked about Diwali here on this podcast, and we talk a lot about historic preservation. But how did that all tie into this? Because I know that's the way in which I met you, because you were at an event representing the Diwali crown of this year, and. What a cool way to use that platform to talk about genealogy, because obviously you were, very engaging and very excited to talk about the work that you're doing. And it dovetails very nicely into historic preservation and the interest of groups like ours. Talk to us about how that all came about and how you've used that as a platform to talk to kids and others about genealogy.
Yeah. So when to join the pageant itself, it was never, I was in college. It didn't, I'm never on my radar. One of my friends reached out to me and she said, the Hindu Milan Mandir is putting on a Diwali pageant. Would you like to be in it? Because she knew I actually, one of my talents is dance. I do Indo-Caribbean dance. And I said, you know what? Yeah, why not? Let's go for it. Again, take risks. Let's see what happens. I went and I was crowned Miss Diwali 2026. And so for those who don't know, Diwali is the Hindu festival of lights. We celebrate the return of like a Hindu goddess, and God to the community, and it celebrates the victory over light over darkness, good over evil, and we celebrate it by lighting diyas or eating sweets, and honestly, that message of light over darkness really carries on to what I try to preach when it comes to genealogy, because it's like I said, genealogy is so much more than what people see it as, and it's something to show that there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and there's a wider light over us. Like, we're fighting, I know the Artemis crew has talked about how they've, have seen, they come out of the world and they kind of see that at the end of the day, we're just humans, like, with our own little issues, and our problems are so minuscule. And just to see that we can all connect and be one is just beautiful. And as Miss Diwali, it's been such a pleasure to, the crown is just an addition to the work I do. It's a more sparkly version of genealogy, but with or without the crown, that's me. And, I'll continue to do that, as Miss Diwali, maybe as Miss Maryland, and in the future, and hope that, people statewide, nationwide, worldwide, get to see the beauty of genealogy. Kids mostly. I really, really want them to know that you can answer the question of who am I and be confident about it. And that's my goal. I just want to make sure that every kid has a smile on their face.
I mean, hard to argue with that,
Yeah.
and hard to put a finer point on that. We normally ask people, a lot of times our conversations start with college, but you're actually in college, and which is awesome. And you're, planning for a future and taking good risks and all that kind of stuff. What are you hoping to do when you graduate? Like, where are people going to find you in the future? If you had to guess.
See, that's a question that I don't know how to answer. Another who am I question. I don't know this question.
Is it going to be in genealogy? Is it going to be in nonprofits? What are you studying, and what is next, I guess?
So right now I'm a psychology student. I'm currently in the lab for child development, and when I say currently, I mean literally currently in the lab for child development. Right. I'm in my lab right now. And it's wonderful to get to work with infants every day and just see how they view the world. I mean, it's just another way of seeing how much youth has to offer this world. And you might think the smallest little minds have such big thoughts. So maybe definitely I want to obviously continue my education in some way. In my lovely home of Maryland, I will definitely do a lot of touring. I love to just go see places and just connect with nature. So that's like one of the big things I would do once I graduate, once I have a little bit more time. Definitely nonprofit work, definitely genealogy work. And honestly, wherever the wind takes me, I've been so grateful to have so many amazing opportunities like this one, and amazing partnerships from like the Ingenuity Project in Baltimore to the Children's Institute of Cultural Understanding and Appreciation in Frederick, and obviously Preservation Maryland, Historic Annapolis, amazing communities in Annapolis. I mean, the work that Maryland does for history is something that I've never seen elsewhere. And I think it's just because Maryland just breathes community, history, and unity. It's like the perfect place to be. And that's why I think, like I said, I feel like my path is going down. I'm driving down the right path. Let's put it that way. And I can't wait to see where I go next.
Yeah, no, I would concur with that. I feel like, maybe people will be referencing this interview years from now, and they can have a glimpse into this. We're headed towards we're in the 250th anniversary year, at least, of the American Declaration of Independence and the independence of the country. That means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. How is, perhaps in your role as Miss Diwali, what are you looking at that being, and where do you hope to take Miss Diwali in 2026, sort of this big year for these celebrations, these commemorations, and people coming together? I think you referred at one point during the interview as sort of America as the melting pot, which is sort of this, this traditional lens through which America is looked at. And obviously it's important to have representation. It's important to see Miss Diwali at some of these events, and you've done an amazing job of doing that. That's where we met. But what do you think about the 250th in the context of what you're doing because of genealogy and this representation as Miss Diwali?
I mean, honestly, my initiative and being crowned Miss Diwali couldn't have come at a better time than this year. I think this year is obviously a pinnacle year in history, and it's something that I think, the one thing that I think we should try to, recognize when celebrating is the melting pot, and is the notion that we have so many people of so many different cultures and so many different backgrounds that make up America and make it what it is. And they bring perspectives from the world, and they bring it to this place where we can innovate, we can create, we can make something that the world has never seen before. And I mean, I think that's really what I really want to highlight for America 250, and show that there's been 250 years and more of just innovation and advocating for what you believe in, and kids growing up in a world where they have a voice, and and I think America 250 is a really wonderful opportunity to really show that like everyone can come together, and you'll see the diversity, you'll see the variety of people and the variety of minds that we have in America, and it's a wonderful thing. And I think that's just one of the many things I want to highlight for America 250 for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously this podcast is evidence that you're doing a good job of that because we met at an event associated with America 250. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go, we always ask people their favorite historic place or site. Do you have a site that just resonates with you that you love? It can be famous. It can be personal. It can be anything in between, just something old.
Well, I guess as somebody who's really interested in genealogy, honestly, anything can be a historical site if you want it to be. My home is a historical site. It's where I took my first steps, you know. But if I had to choose, I have to admit I've been a little bit obsessed with Expedition Unknown, which is a show on Discovery with Josh Gates. And he travels to, corners of the world to discover like any old legend or story, find lost treasure. It's like a little kid's dream, honestly. I would love to go on an expedition with him if I could, but that's like a bucket list item. But if I had to choose, there's this legend of Captain Kidd where he supposedly has treasure buried somewhere near Maryland or at least around the East Coast. So I would say my favorite historical place is where that treasure is buried. When I find it, I will let you guys know.
We would love that. We are a nonprofit. Preservation Maryland powers PreserveCast, so we're always accepting donations. Athina, this has been awesome, and let's have you back in a couple of years and check in and find out where you are next. Good luck with representing Miss Diwali this year and the competition for Miss Maryland. We know who we want to win. And we will talk again soon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, of course. I love being here.
Thanks for listening to PreserveCast. To dig deeper into this episode's story, head over to preservecast.org for show notes and our collection of previous episodes. Don't forget to engage with this podcast by subscribing, commenting, and leaving a review. Follow along on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at PreserveCast for even more. PreserveCast is currently recorded in Walkersville, Maryland, and sponsored by the 1772 Foundation, and powered by Preservation Maryland. Thanks for listening, and keep on preserving.